Reaching all the way back to 1948, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Fate Radio is carrying on that tradition. Here is your host of Fate Radio, Kat Hobson.
Hello there. Welcome to Fate Mag Radio, the online voice of Fate magazine. I am so glad to say I am your host for this show. My name is Kat Hobson. I am here with a wonderful guest. And, you know, I just love doing what I get to do. I am fortunate. I get to talk to the most interesting people, and I get to learn the most interesting things, and I get to bring it to you. My guest tonight is Stephen Myers. He and I first spoke when he had written his first book. It's been some time now. He is the author of 3 books now. The first is titled Lost Technologies of the Great Pyramid. The second is The Great Pyramid Prosperity Machine. I'm telling you, they're really fantastic. The third is new. It is Pharaoh's Pump Analyzed. Oh dear. Examining the research of Edward J. Kunkel. Got it. Losing my mind and my eyesight. But anyway, I am just really thrilled to have him here. His research has included on-site research. He's done extensive on-site work at the Giza Plateau. He has been doing lectures all over. He has really done a fantastic job of getting the work done and getting the information out. He's also funded a nonprofit foundation, and this is dedicated to continuing this research. And it's really, I think it's really important because, you know, if we were able to do a full canal system and do other things that we have accomplished before advancing the technology as we went, why on earth would we think that people that could survive in that environment have mining capabilities to develop some of the things that we see in their tombs and live the lives that we have seen documented, wouldn't be able to accomplish some of the things that Stephen is proposing. The nonprofit you can find at www.thepump.org. Stephen is really working hard to redevelop the ancient but advanced technologies because I think, and I know that this is his premise, that this would help us with our world. You know, we face a lot of challenges environmentally, socially, and in other ways. And why would we not want to learn from those that came before us instead of just continuously reinventing the wheel, right? And Stephen Myers, thank you so much for being here to discuss this with me. I'm so excited about our conversation. It has been a while.
Well, thank you for having me back on the show. I really appreciate this opportunity.
Well, you know you're welcome to them. We have a good time when we have a conversation.
We sure do. I appreciate it.
Well, I'm going to start like people haven't heard you before. I'm sure everybody and their brother has, because you do, get invited a lot. People are fascinated by your work. But what brought your interest initially to Giza? What compelled you to start this?
Well, I have a very technical background. I'm a ham radio operator. I have the FCC commercial general class license and other degrees and certificates that are deal with technology. And I like history, but I like the technology of history, if you will. Mm-hmm. When studying World War II in high school, I was more interested in the planes and the ships and all their capabilities, more so than the generals or the politics of World War II. So I just have a technical background. And if you like technology and history, ultimately your interest will possibly focus on the Great Pyramid. It's a 45-story skyscraper that was built in distant antiquity, and it exhibits a lot of high technology. So that's how I kind of got started in studying the Great Pyramid.
Well, but it's not really common, or a lot of other people would be doing what you do, to actually save up, build up, go there, get access, which you did, and be able to go and examine it.
I appreciate that. Yeah, at first it was just it was just an interest and a passion, but now it's become a life quest. It started a nonprofit foundation at the pump.org, thepump.org. So that's where all of our information is located, and then conducted research, read a lot of books, that type of thing, and ultimately have written 3 books now, and have recently gone on a tour. I've led a tour to Egypt.
I saw that.
Had a great time there. So yeah, it's been kind of all encompassing, if you will, and the whole ball of wax, if you consider that. Also, we produced 2 documentaries that were on DVDs, but now we've made them available on YouTube. So you can find out about that on our website, with a lot of computer-generated animations about how the Great Pyramid was assembled and why it was assembled.
And that is thepump.org.
Yes.
And they can find out a lot more about you there, too.
Yes.
So I included a lot of information about you in the show blurb, but there's so much more. And when you first went to Giza, had you already kind of developed the notion that this was a thing? Were you actually going to seek validation for the theory that you were proposing, or did the theory come after you evaluated the area?
Well, no, the Great Pyramid is probably the most studied structure ever built by man.
Yes.
More books have been written about it than any other structure on Earth. So I've certainly had a idea of how it was assembled, and also why it was assembled. And then I've been to Egypt several times, but still nothing can compare with actually being there, in the shadow of the Great Pyramid, to see it in all its grandeur. It's just incomprehensible, if you will.
Well, I remember when we first spoke,
pyramid shaped. The components are beyond the scope of human back muscles to really move and set in place. So yeah, it's awe-inspiring and impressive.
Well, when we first spoke, you had these thoughts, and I agree with them. It's something to see when I started going back, because I know what I like, right, when I'm reading. And I thought, I'm believing this. I think this is a very compelling idea. And so I started reading the reviews of your book. And, I think that the most common theme through the reviews are, a common sense look at the purpose of the Great Pyramid. Like the comparison to huge engineering projects in modern times, it just makes sense. I was very skeptical when I bought this book, and I'm reading from the second book. I was expecting something far-fetched and new age-ish, or another claim that the Great Pyramid was a ram pump. What I saw when reading were some incredible common sense insights that are completely new. And, my favorite, similar to his first book, this was going to a glass enclosed bookshelf, and the title of that particular review is Another Ruby in the Sand. How cool is that? I'd like that. But, so these are people who are familiar with your work. They're on your second book. And for those who, when I talk about your stuff, may think that, I'm numb to bizarrism because of the show and some of the ideas that people present, but I present people here because I think that they're valid, and you surely are. So I love that people are becoming so accepting of these notions. Do you want to tell people a little bit about your initial concept prior to going?
Sure. You did mention some book reviews. It seems like I do have a lot of reviews that people say the idea or explanations for the Great Pyramid I provide are compelling. And then there's quite a few reviews that, this is it can't be this way. So there's a lot of preconceived notions about the Great Pyramid, different ideas of how it was built, and that type of thing. I just hope the listeners can do like you did and take a chance on my book and find out about the information that those books contain. But yeah, the idea about the Great Pyramid is that it was built by geniuses and that it provided a huge return on investment. It wasn't just a tomb or a structure to show us they knew pi or anything like that, but that it was built with efficiencies like a factory, factory production line efficiencies. And how they built the Great Pyramid was that they had water locks between the Great Pyramid construction site and the Nile River. And they would move stones on barges up the water locks, like those in the Erie Canal or the Panama Canal, and move those stones up all the way to the building site effortlessly. And the first stones they set in place were the casing stones for the exterior of the Great Pyramid, just the first level of casing stones, the stones on the outside. And they're bonded together watertight with a strong bonding agent, and they would fill that square wall, if you will, up with water. So it was a big pond up on the Giza Plateau. And when they allowed stones on barges to come up, they would fill that pond up with stones that came up on barges all the way up into that pond. And they would move stones off the barges and into the pond. And when the pond was filled with stones, the first layer of the Great Pyramid was assembled. So that was a systematic process that I describe in my first book, as well as in my first documentary or DVD video series that's on our website. Systematic, level by level, all the way up to the apex, the capstone, and it was built effortlessly. And it had a purpose, which was that it was infrastructure for the people that built it. Like we build dams or we build road systems, and that's not just symbolic or anything. Those things serve a purpose. And the Great Pyramid was a machine that was built to pump water. So it was a huge water pump.
Well, your point where you said we don't do it just because, it's that they serve a purpose. While we have created beauty or intricacy for intricacy's sake, I don't feel like that's something that we do often. We certainly don't do it on the scale of the Great Pyramid. And the fact that the logistics behind doing that with that project would have been so tough. To do it just because would not be logical.
Right.
And, plus there was such a need for something such as you describe in that area. The Nile Valley at times was not what it is now, based on, research and digs into the past. But you can never, they could never have enough water. They could never not need to plan. We have the Hoover Dam. We also affected the environment with the Hoover Dam. Possible they did that with the pyramid. Who knows? But I just find it so fascinating that you just analyzed all of this. It blows my mind. And you commented about having different, differing reviews on your books. I don't think people who have actually read your book will come at you with like a crackpot theme or whatever. I just don't see that. Because the people that I was reading are people who did read your book and who did consider your ideas. I've read your books. I consider your ideas. I think they're logical. And when you started this and you actually got there, you're seeing the environment. Did that confirm for you what you were thinking, or did you go, oh, this is going to be more complex than I thought? Did you approach it with confidence, or did you feel like it was going to be a tough sell even to yourself?
Well, it wasn't a tough sell to myself because I know that, like you say, all civilizations need water. People say, well, they had the yearly inundation. They did have the yearly inundation for water, and they had it up until they built the Aswan Dam. Mm-hmm. So the people in charge thought that the Aswan Dam was more important than the yearly inundation, which doesn't exist in the Valley of the Nile anymore. But Egypt has always been a civilization that needed to move water for a whole host of purposes. And it's interesting that in the real world, the largest water pump in the world is in the Valley of the Nile. It's the Mubarak pumping station. And people can word search that and Google it. But they built that as a huge, huge water pump for primarily for irrigation. So everyone that thinks, they don't need water pumps in Egypt, or the water is right there, that's not really very good thinking. I know that I live in a rural part of Oregon with a lot of farms, and every farm has frontage up against a river, if you will. But they have to pump the water out of the river up onto the farmland. And, I could go to a farmer and say, oh, you don't need a water pump. You've already got water in the river right there. But farmers are very practical people, and they know they need to pump water out of the river up onto the land to make it useful. And the same with people in the Valley of the Nile in ancient times. So in ancient times, they needed a huge water pumping system, and in modern times, they needed a huge water pumping system.
Well, I just think it fascinates me. But when you started presenting this, you got your information, you got the first book done, you started talking about it, exposing other people to it, and then you started trying to get the word out further than your friends, further than people like me who were it wasn't an easy sell, but I buy logic, right? So what did you do? What did you do when you started trying to, as they say, hit the circuit, whatever, but try to get this information out? Because, your first book was trying to give the detailed description, all right? And then, explain the lost technologies. Then, you're trying to kind of get past the misinformation that's laying out there all over the ground. And, you're describing the moving of the stones, setting up everything, And again, the precision of the work. That's what gets me. Just like, those H blocks down in South America. My husband is a machinist. And even with CNC machinery, that's tough to get that kind of precision. How did you get people listening? How did you get people understanding what you were doing?
Well, it's been a hard sell. I'll be honest with you. To say that the Great Pyramid actually helped people in a tangible way is a really hard sell. They say, well, the experts, Egyptologists, say it's a tomb, but they ask how do long open passages in the Great Pyramid and doors on pivots, how does that protect a pharaoh's mummy? And then, of course, there's no coherent answer other than to say, well, that's what the Egyptologists say. But it's been a hard sell. Egyptologists have put up like a wall of silence about my research. They won't even say that it's wrong. They won't even acknowledge that I exist. And, it's disheartening that way. But when you talk to people that are like machinists or truck drivers or people that work in shipyards or people that actually do stuff in the real world, those people say, wow, that's compelling. The idea of using water locks and barges all the way up to the construction site, and the idea that it pumps water, and which justifies the huge construction cost. Those are the people that say that it's very compelling and have an open mind. So it's interesting. It's kind of a mindset that people have. If they already say, well, I believe what I read in books by Egyptologists, then you can't convince them. But other people with a technical background or an open mind like you, they have a open mind, and many accept the direction of research I'm following. So it's but I've been at this for quite a while now.
Indeed.
And there's a lot of people that are familiar with the research. And when I first started, they weren't. So it's not as hard as it was. So I'm glad to hear that. People's minds change awful hard, if you will, and but people are coming around more and more every day.
Well, I find in what I do, and I discuss and research all things all things really anomalous, but I find it fascinating that when people first, when we had a society where people who went to the Great Pyramid saw it, said, holy wow, we've got to tell people about this. This is astounding. And, then they went home and word of mouth got stuff out, and, not many people could be global travelers. Although there's always the ones who do, and they're who I admire so much because that was so brave in that time period, all of those time periods. But when people don't understand something, they create a reason for it. It's kind of like with astrology. They find shapes within the stars. They find, I'm going to be branded a heretic. That's okay. I've been worse. But, they find shapes in the stars. They develop stories about the shapes that they see. They develop behavior patterns associated with the shapes that they see. Those shapes, those figures that they see in the stars affect people's lives. There's, and that's without outside influence. It's just an environmental thing from what I understand. But I'm a Scorpio. I'm supposed to be mean and feisty and, temperamental. And of course, none of that's true. but that's what I'm talking about. We assign behaviors to things we don't understand that are relevant to what our lives can and our minds can handle. So the fact when people found this, and it was obviously in a country of primitives, right? Because they didn't dress like the people that were traveling there. They didn't live like the people who were traveling there. They were different. They were probably considered barbaric to the people that were, judging them left, right, and, all over. But so they would not possibly have been able to have the ability to build such intricate engineering. And that once people get a story built in, it's really tough to contradict that, which is what you've been doing and which is why you get so much flack, I think. It's very brave of you.
Well, I appreciate that. I'm just a humble researcher with some information that I'm trying to present, to people that have an interest. But people often have preconceived notions when they come to the Great Pyramid. It's direct physical evidence that people have to come to grips with or try to understand or explain. The science of Egyptology, it has its genesis in tomb robbing, in the 1800s and in the 19th century, all of that time. Egyptology was essentially people breaking into tombs and stealing the treasure and then selling it to museums so museums could get paying customers to come look at it. It was quite a racket. So that's the mindset of Egyptology and still is. So when they encounter the Great Pyramid, evidently that's a tomb because we're tomb robbers in effect, and there's no treasure in the tomb, so evidently the tomb robbers stole it in distant antiquity before we could steal it. And that's their explanation of the Great Pyramid. So it's bizarre, if you're a hammer, the world is a nail. So, and then other people that are like, have a religious kind of orientation, the Holy Bible and all of that, they've come up with the idea that the Great Pyramid was built by the God of the Bible to confirm Bible prophecy. And they've come up with all of these explanations of the passages and chambers, come up with their own measuring system, the pyramid inch, and they've decided that the Great Pyramid was the Bible in stone. So
okay, I'm going to interject here because I am Christian. I was in a Christian private school for part of my education. Not a lot of it, but some. And I've never heard that.
Oh,
Ever.
Yeah. There was a whole theory about that. A lot of people believed it, about the Great Pyramid and the Bible, all of these interlapping correlations that the Bible is confirmed by the Great Pyramid. They supposedly the Great Pyramid predicts the birthplace of Jesus with the Bethlehem angle and all of this stuff. It goes on and on and on. So different ideas come and go. A recent presidential candidate, Ben Carson, thought that the Great Pyramid had a lot to do with that type of thing, including that the coffer inside the king's chamber was some sort of a measuring, it measured volume and all of that thing. There's a video of him talking about all of this type of stuff. So it was quite prominent 100 years ago, very prominent, taught in universities and that type of thing. But it has lost favor now because it's based on a lot of very poor research methods. But look up, Great Pyramid Bible, word search that, and you'll come up with thousands of websites, big, thick books
I have got it written down. I'm going to do that.
Yeah, it's really
because
strange.
like I said, this is the first I've heard of that.
Oh yeah, I don't agree with that research for a whole host of reasons, but it's definitely there, and still a lot of proponents to that idea. So it's a strange world out there, and there's a lot of ideas about the Great Pyramid that are presented, including the ideas I have, and people need to kind of look at those ideas and see if they have merit or not.
Well, you've studied this for over 20 years. This isn't something that you just came to fly by night, decided to write a book and change the world and the world thinking and set yourself up with a target on your back as you did it, right? This is something that you put a lot of work into. And you've been in numerous magazines. You've been interviewed by just about everybody who has an interest in learning different theories. It's really something that's pretty cool. I know a lot of people who have written fiction with ideas similar, but not entirely the same. I love this topic. But, you're not a fly-by-night researcher. You've been doing this for a really long time. And you're one of the people, with your engineering background that I confound a lot because I do not have a STEM background. Had I known what I was going to be doing later, I would have gotten one. But hindsight.
Well, yeah, it's I've been here for a while. I've done well over 250 radio talk show interviews, and there's a lot of interest in this. It's there seems to be a hunger and thirst for the idea that ancient people were geniuses and that they built this massive structure that actually did something, that it was a machine that functioned. And that's why there's so many complex passages and chambers inside the Great Pyramid. The idea that ancient people knew what they were doing and created this structure at a huge cost, but it provided an even greater return on investment. So those are compelling ideas to people, instead of what a lot of people say, well, they were primitive back then, and they had some sort of a death cult, and the leader used up all of his resources to build this big pyramid structure, and they had a big ramp and strong back muscles and built it, and that's what happened. So there's certainly a divergence in ideas, but the direction I'm following gives honor and glory to the original builders, and that their culture was a high culture, high civilization, high technology, and brilliant people.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't see it as anything short of honoring them. So, and I think I told you this, but the only time that I've been able to speak with someone else personally who has been in the Great Pyramid extensively was someone who was in the bottom, and there's a table, a pool table, not a pool table like clink clink, but a pool table like water. And it's fresh water that was in it. I don't know if that is still there. I'm sure it is. But anyway, when they would empty that, it would fill back, and it was always fresh water. Did you have any experience of seeing something like that when you were there, or is that even a possibility now for there to be fresh water pooling into the base of the Great Pyramid?
There is. There's a water table that's pretty high right now. It has varied through the millennia, but because there's a town all the way around it, Cairo is the biggest city in Africa, There's the water table's up higher than it used to be, if I can put it that way. That pool that you're talking about, that pool table, is down in Campbell's Tomb and in other excavations on the Giza Plateau. Not exactly associated with the Great Pyramid, but there is certainly a lot of evidence for water on the Giza Plateau. Flanders Petrie found Nile earth inside the passages and chambers, which is sediment. And Herodotus described the Great Pyramid as being like an island surrounded by water. And the Great Pyramid, up until the 18th century, had a wall around it. So we think that wall impounded water. It was about 30 feet tall. Some say maybe a little less. And a whole host of other evidences. The casing stones on the outside were bonded together watertight with a cement or a bonding agent that was even stronger than the stone itself. So they knew what they were doing and had a lot of technical prowess when they built the Great Pyramid in a lot of different ways. And it served the precision of the Great Pyramid served, a function, if you will. So just like the precision in your lawnmower serves a function, precision doesn't denote symbolism or religion. Oftentimes, precision construction has to do with function. So that's what we think anyway.
Well, that's really interesting. Out of curiosity, because, I am a cat, but do you know, or has anyone tested that bonding agent to ascertain what it's composed of?
Yes, several people have, and you can find out on the internet everything about it. But there's scholarly debate. There's no example. There's no specimen that really can be analyzed by an independent researcher or a lab. Egyptologists say, well, that was plaster of Paris that they put on the stones, and then they could slide like one casing stone on top of the other casing stone, and that's all it's for. But it doesn't have the characteristics of plaster of Paris, if you will. So Egyptologists essentially came up with a story that's inconsistent with the direct physical evidence. But it is a very strong bonding agent, and I contend that it's a lost technology on how they built it, how they created the bonding agent, which would be actually quite valuable in modern times.
Yes, it would.
It would, but Egyptology has a stranglehold on ancient Egypt, and they say, oh, well, it's just mortar or plaster or Paris or whatever. But
neither of which would stand up to elements.
No, and it wouldn't be as strong as people have described it. Years ago, 100 years ago, you could take your little chisel and chisel off a piece of it that has oozed out, if you will. But most of that's all gone now through the centuries. And some people have tried to remove some stones that were bonded together with and the stone would break before the joint would come apart.
Get out.
So it's quite fascinating. The ancient builders were geniuses and were very capable in producing, products like this extremely strong bonding agent.
That would have to be an epoxy of some type. That's astounding.
Yeah, it is astounding.
Well, that is part of what I just love about talking to you. Because if I have all these questions and I get blown away and fascinated, other people will too. But what is, with this bonding agent, and things of this nature. I mean, obviously, where does the flood play into this period? Because that would not have survived the Great Flood. Or
you're talking about the biblical flood?
I am.
Great. I'm a catastrophist, if you will. I believe that the history of mankind has been punctuated by a number of catastrophes.
Me too.
And some would say the biblical flood is a catastrophe. Probably the Great Pyramid was built pre-flood, if you can say that. Pre-Diluvian is a word you don't hear very often. And because it's so strong, so ultra-modern, no ornamentation to be destroyed during a flood, that it probably survived a flood type of catastrophe, and that the Great Pyramid is much older than Egyptology says it was, that it is. Egyptology can't demonstrate that the culture that they study, the Egypt of the pharaohs, that culture is capable of building the Great Pyramid. So Egyptology's never made a casing stone like those at the Great Pyramid. Egyptology's never moved a 70-ton payload 1 inch in the manner they say working people did all day long. So that their dismal ability to prove their stories has caused a lot of controversy. But also, I think the Great Pyramid was probably built much earlier than Egyptologists say it was, and survived what's called the biblical flood.
Well, and probably several other as well. When you talk about the ramp theory, which is held by a lot of people, which is that there were several, there's the ramp built up, and all of this stone was quarried and brought in by strictly manual labor. And that's tough. A quarrying without abilities that we would expect to see now, with what we have now, would be tough to get that level of uniformity. And then transporting without something other than, back work would be so difficult. Then you get, getting it to an elevation is almost ridiculously impossible, even with all of the hundreds of thousands of slaves and, I guess, non-slaves, tradesmen that they had available to them to do that. That's a lot to swallow. And I had questions about that when I was first educated about it. I was like, I don't think so. My God, that would take the whole population. And it's hard. You would be having people drop like flies. But why do you think people rebel against your idea?
Conceptual rigidity is the reason. If people have been taught something, then they accept it as being fact, then it's very hard to change somebody's minds. Sometimes people compare the human mind with like a computer hard drive, but hard drives,
or a steel trap.
Yeah, hard drives, you can erase data or information and add new data that's true or correct, but it's very difficult for people to do. The younger generation say, "Oh, if you're over 30, you can't change your mind." Well, I'm finding that out. Younger people are certainly more are willing to embrace my ideas. Egyptologists who wrote their books and dissertations about the big ramp, they're never going to change their ideas. But
well, they would have to admit they were wrong.
They would. But there is that idea, the big ramp, and they always have illustrations and stories and that, but they never engage in the scientific method and have a demonstration. We live in a civilization that we're blessed with many 70-ton payloads. An Abrams A1 tank, about 70 tons. Railroad locomotive, about 70 tons. All Egyptology has to do is get a bunch of people and drag one of those things up a dirt ramp, and people like me would go back into the woodwork. But Egyptology doesn't do that because it's an impossibility. And most of what they say is an impossibility, and they don't engage in the scientific method by producing demonstrations. They say, well, the casing stones are cut to extreme precision, but they use bronze chisels or Doriite pounders, and they made casing stones all day. But Egyptology won't make a casing stone. The entire science for the last 200 years has never made a single casing stone in the manner they say working people made them all day long. So it's strange, how they get away with it. I don't understand. That is
strange. Well,
it is strange. Let's say I had an idea that, they use cows that jump over the moon. They use those cows to lift the stones and set them in place. And I'm a cow jump over the moonologist. And then they had lots of cows. And you can read about cows jumping over the moon in literature and everything else. Well, the first person I would tell that to would say, hey, get a cow and show me. Like the state of Missouri, show me state.
Absolutely.
Hey, show me a cow that jumps over the moon and I'll believe you. But Egyptology somehow can get away with their 17th century stories about this big ramp that was bigger than the Great Pyramid. And so building it was the biggest project in ancient Egypt, and then the Great Pyramid, and then taking the ramp down, that was the second biggest project of in the valley of the Nile. But and then all those strong back muscles, and we dragged these stones without any handling scars.
Well, and several times too, because after you built the Great Pyramid, you had to do the other work.
Right.
You had to do that again, and then again, and then.
I know, and I don't know how they get away with it, but Egyptology is a science that's in crisis, and they have become stagnated. The only science that's the same as it was 200 years ago. And it is in crisis because people are realizing that it's not, scientific, no demonstrations or anything like that. There was another science called phrenology, which was the comparison of character traits and the bumps on people's heads. Mm-hmm. And, you could tell like a person's character or their intellect by the bumps on their heads. And that's phrenology. They taught that at universities, books were written and everything else, but that science has gone away. It doesn't exist anymore because it couldn't withstand the rigors of the scientific method. And that's the crisis that Egyptology is facing. It is as easy and as possible to move a heavy stone using cows that jump over the moon as it is by dragging a 70-ton payload up a dirt ramp without handling scars and setting it in place like those are set in place at the Great Pyramid. It's never been done. So Egyptology is a science that may be the next science that goes away, if you will. Strange.
Well, it is strange. To me, it's strange that if you're anyone else, if you're espousing a theory, even one that is considered settled, and someone comes to you and says, you need to demonstrate the basis for this theory. Where's the work? Well, if they're not presenting it and supporting it, I agree with you. It's irresponsible. And just because you've rested on those laurels for all this time, sometimes you get a little bit of a numb butt and you don't realize that it's being poked. It's time to get up off of them and do the work, and let's understand this a little better. But
You're correct.
It's just really something that astounds me, because there's so many stories behind the pyramids, and we're going to get into some of the other stuff that makes you friends with so many people when we get to our second hour, which is the Orion experience. But we're not going to touch that quite yet, because it's something that you get into. Talked about astronomy, and we're going to go to astrology, and these are a lot of sacred cows that you're poking. And that, to me, that's one of the things that make me admire what you do, because win, lose, or draw, wrong or right, whatever, you're using a scientific method, you're using science, you're using logic, you're using mathematics, you're approaching this in a very intellectual manner. And the theories pretty much hold. There's always going to be something here or there, but what I'm seeing is standing. And I just am so impressed that you're taking a lot of rap about this. Not as much now probably as when you started, or maybe more, because it's being accepted.
True. There's a lot of opposition and that type of thing, but that is not an indicator of truth. What is true or not? There was a lot of opposition to the idea of penicillin. You'd be surprised. Alexander Fleming was a botanist, and he was studying bread mold, and he found this bread mold that would kill infections, if you will, and developed penicillin. Well, the medical community, the experts, they said, well, we don't need penicillin. We've never needed it. They said, oh, it's too expensive. There's no use making it. They said, it doesn't work. Penicillin doesn't work. And it took Alexander Fleming quite a bit longer to get the idea of penicillin accepted than it did to discover penicillin. They said, well, he's not a medical professional, so how can he make a assertion about this drug working or not? So, and then ultimately, after a very long struggle, penicillin was accepted. So it's just the nature of things. We're in a revolution of ideas. The Piltdown skull was found, and the anthropologists who were the experts of the day all accepted it. Everybody, all the anthropologists. And it wasn't until 40 years later that it was acknowledged that the Piltdown skull was a forgery, even though there were visible file marks. And what happened was the first generation of anthropologists that accepted it and wrote their dissertations on the Piltdown skull, they all died off. And then the next generation of anthropologists never thought the Piltdown skull was valid in the first place, but neither group changed their minds. So right now we're waiting for more and more Egyptologists to die off to get out of the way. I know Egyptology
that's cold.
is probably the greatest hindrance to understanding ancient Egypt that there is. So we're in a revolution of ideas, and it's a long process.
Oh, gosh. Well, we are going to take a break. We are going to take our top of the hour break. For everyone listening, I know that you're enjoying this, but we will be back, and we will see you on the flip side when we come back with my guest. I am Stephen Myers. I'm so excited that you're here. Thank you.
Thank you.
The UNX Network Year 2 anniversary at XCon 2023. XCon is being held this year from October the 30th to November 1st at the beautiful Oasis Hotel and Conference Center in Springfield, Missouri. Top speakers include host of America Unearthed, Scott Walter, plus Haley Ramsey, Sev Tak, UNX's very own Maureen Richmond and Dan Terry, Mindy Toutfest, Harriet McFeely, Forrest Crawford, and many more. And they're all coming to deliver new information on topics like UFOs, alien encounters, cryptids and ancient secrets, and real hauntings from the afterlife. Join us for the film premiere of A Haunting in Blue Hill. And don't miss the Mad Hatter Paranormal Halloween Bash, Banquet, and Costume Contest on All Hallows Eve, October 31st. So join us as we close out the 2023 conference season. Info and tickets are available now at unxnetwork.com. That's unxnetwork.com, and we'll see you there.
Are you thinking about purchasing a wood-fired heating or cooking appliance but don't know where to start? The new book, Wood-Fired Heating and Cooking, will guide you through the process and make the decision much easier. Find out about wood stoves, wood-burning fireplace inserts, masonry heaters, cook stoves, brick ovens, and more. Learn about operation and maintenance, buying and storing wood, even how to make your own charcoal. A bonus section includes delicious recipes for cooking in a wood-burning oven, grill, tandoori oven, or smoker. The wise homeowner, prepper, or homesteader will have the ability to heat their home with wood when the power goes out, or to save money on increasing gas bills. Wood-fired heating and cooking is available at Amazon. Visit www.woodfiredpub.com for more information. That's woodfiredpub.com.
Why was the basketball court all wet? Because the players kept dribbling on it.
The dad joke. Corny, groan-worthy, but also one of the simplest ways to share a moment with your kids.
What did the buffalo say when he dropped his son off for school? Bye, son.
So take a moment to make your kid laugh, because dad jokes rule. Make your kid laugh today. Go to fatherhood.gov. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
This is Margie Kay, inviting you to listen to my UNX News podcast or watch the show on YouTube or Rumble every Friday at 7 Eastern, 6 Central Time, when I discuss the news of the week and I interview top researchers, filmmakers, authors, and investigators. Mark your calendar for the UNX News Show, Fridays at 7 p.m. Eastern Time at unxnetwork.com.
We here at the X value your opinion, and we're asking for your vote for the People's Choice Awards for the best in-house show and the best syndicated program on the UNX network. Now, if you're an UNX supporter and an UNX listener and you have a favorite show you want to vote for, just go to unxnetwork.com and cast your vote on the show page. Winners will be announced at this year's 2023 UNXCon on Halloween, October the 31st. It's going to be a big party, and we really hope to see you there. Get your tickets now while you still can for the biggest Halloween party in the paranormal, the XCon 2023 in Springfield, Missouri, and run over to unxnetwork.com right now and cast your vote for your favorite show on the X.
We are the choice for real alternative talk on the World Wide Web. KUNX-DB, the X.
Welcome back for the second hour of Fate Mag Radio here on UNX Network. I am so happy to be here on KUNX, and I'm glad that you're here too. My guest tonight is Stephen Myers. He is a multiple titles author, and he has researched to beat the band, The Great Pyramid. And he has 3 books relevant to the topic. The first was Lost Technologies of the Great Pyramid, which was my introduction. And I'm here to tell you, if you get a chance, you need to make a chance to read this. The second book was The Great Pyramid Prosperity Machine. And the third is Pharaoh's Pump Analyzed, examining the research of Edward J. Kunkel. So I think that you will absolutely be mesmerized by this research. I know that when I first heard about this, I was like, yeah, pull the other one, right? This is a gimmick. Well, you know what? It is freaking astounding. And if you give it the time and open your mind, you're going to have so much fun learning. And it's never boring. So, Stephen, thank you again so much for joining me. It's been a while since we spoke. I'm so glad you're here.
Well, I'm glad to be back. It's such a pleasant experience being interviewed by you. I really appreciate it.
Oh, wow. I appreciate that. Thank you. And, you know, it's something that when you started doing this research and you were going against everything that Egyptology has taught us over the years, although, as you said, they've been stuck in a rut since they started, pretty much. You really kicked up a storm when you started with this. And I find it interesting that people are getting more open to the idea. I know that you're being interviewed left and right. This has been some time. You're not new to this game. We talked about that in the first segment. And your work and your research stand up. You know, I really find it surprising because I do understand the intricacies of getting into the pyramid. I understand when you're espousing a different idea to people that have a vested interest in maintaining the status quo, that had to be so hard. Did you feel like you were never going to get this information out?
Well, sometimes I still feel that way, but, I'm just pursuing truth is what I'm doing, not an agenda or anything. I'm just trying to use the laws of physics and the scientific method, if you will, to understand an ancient structure, to understand that direct physical evidence. And my interpretation of the evidence is that it was infrastructure for the civilization that built it. It was a water pumping device that provided prosperity for the civilization that created the Great Pyramid. And it is high technology that can help our modern but very troubled world.
Well, especially in regions similar to that.
Yes, third world countries. Yes, they could use that. You wouldn't need to build a monstrous Great Pyramid structure. You could just use the technology, if you will, and redevelop it using PVC pipe and some off-the-shelf valves, some polypropylene containers, and custom fabrication, and ultimately make this unique and efficient water pumping system to help third world countries, if you will, and other places. And of course, the pumped water can be used to generate electricity, for irrigation, and a whole host of other purposes.
What about desalination?
Well, I just don't know about that. I think it would be a different type of that part would be a little bit different. But this is mainly to physically move water up higher, if you will, and pump water, and but it would make water available for desalinization for a different type of technology, or a separate process, if you will. But yeah, it would, in that regard, it could be utilized for that purpose.
Well, in that case, it would be fantastic in some of these places that are surrounded by water with nothing to drink.
You are correct, and it would be very helpful that in that way. But a lot of people in third world countries can't afford the expensive hydroelectric dams, if you will, or the expensive fuel for like diesel-powered water pumps, that type of thing. And so they're in kind of a difficult situation. But this technology we're trying to redevelop so that people can make it themselves, if you will, in cottage industries or backyard shops, that type of thing. So we're hopefully going to help people in that regard. We're a humanitarian organization to help people. I know recently was 9/11, and 9/11 was a horrible thing, but twice as many people die every day because they don't have clean water to drink, or they're unable to irrigate their farmland. So we want to try to reduce that number of people when this ancient technology can be redeveloped in modern times.
Well, do you see a way that this could be utilized in areas that have such limited water?
Yes. Yeah, if they have limited water, they can, I know this is going to sound strange, but my books talk about it. They can pump water up, generate electricity, and use that same water that went back down through a generator and pump that back up. So yes, it can be used in desert areas that doesn't have like a lot of water, but reuse the water, if you will, and not add any contaminants or anything like that to it to generate, I guess it would be called hydroelectricity. And that would be an excellent alternative to hydroelectric dams or fossil fueled powered electric generators. So there's a lot of potential for the technology, but like you've talked about a number of times, it can be a hard sell, if you will. Just like penicillin was a hard sell. So funding has been a struggle for our nonprofit foundation.
A lot of oxes being gored here. But, something that the reason I asked those two questions, I'm fascinated because I have friends who go to different places in Africa to dig wells for communities.
Yes. And,
just think if this were something that could be implemented with that,
yes,
it's astounding what could be accomplished, because not only would you be providing fresh water, you would be providing a method for electrification of their system. You could bring more, well, not even just technology, but just providing basics, lights.
Right. More services, more prosperity. I know a lot of church groups, even in where I live, dig wells in Africa for people.
All over, different countries, some of them in Uganda, some of them in Uganda, different really dangerous places these people are going. And I feel like if the places weren't so desperate as far as their environment, that maybe people would be less focused on having to survive and more focused on improving their lives and communities.
Right. It would give them, a little bit of opportunity, if you will. Here in the United States, we're inundated by infrastructures like the power grid or even the sewer system, or we have water right into our homes and all of that, and roads. Our civilization didn't build roads and bridges just for the fun of it. We built it to provide prosperity. All the stuff I get from Amazon comes over those roads, and commerce and all of that. So the Great Pyramid is a type of infrastructure that provided prosperity, leisure, and a good lifestyle for the people that invested the money to build the Great Pyramid. And my books describe the process in great detail about how the Great Pyramid was built and pumped water.
You know, they do. And they make it very understandable and very easy to envision. And, you know, I forget that not everyone has read your books yet, which just astounds me. Everyone should be reading your books. But they do. You provide so much information that
I appreciate that.
So, and I should be telling people that more instead of going on and on about what could be accomplished if people did pay attention to your books. So,
they're available on Amazon, but you'd be surprised how many modern day researchers that attack me on Facebook or whatever are non-book reading researchers. They tell me, "Oh, you're wrong," and I say, "Well, what page of my book do you have trouble with?" And they say, "Well, I'm not going to read your book." Oh, okay.
Well, I will tell people.
But you know I'm wrong. Okay.
I'm going to tell people this because this is how fantastic you are that you have made this available to people, because you can get Lost Technologies of the Great Pyramid and their Kindle edition on your Kindle Unlimited. And I mean, I have the paperbacks, but that's okay. If you need to be able to get this, you can. And I would strongly suggest give it a read. You know, I know that probably to a lot of people, this may sound over the top or something that you're not familiar with. You haven't heard about it or whatever, but get the book, get the first book. Because if you read the first book, you're going to want the others. But Lost Technologies of the Great Pyramid by Stephen Myers, get it on Facebook. Good Lord. On Kindle. And
right.
You'll see me talk about it on Facebook. But seriously, check it out. You can check Stephen out, too, because he's on Facebook.
Yeah, there's both my first two books have a Kindle edition. And with Amazon or Kindle Unlimited, they can download it for free. So, it's not like I'm getting rich off of this type of thing. So, but
the information is so important.
It is.
I get that.
Yeah. As a nonprofit foundation, we want to disseminate the information. So in this way, we've made both books essentially free to the reader. And, and I think it's helped.
I think so too. It just blows my mind though, that people came at you. And I'm like, it's there, just read it. But I do love it. There's so much that, that's there that can just change the world.
I appreciate that. Yeah, there's quite a bit of illustrations in the books.
Mm-hmm. Great illustrations.
And then the two documentaries that are in video series format from our website to watch for free. They have a lot of computer-generated animations that people can help them understand the whole process. It's quite visual and involved on how the Great Pyramid was assembled and pumped water. So those are great teaching aids to get the idea of just how much the original builders were geniuses and how they created their prosperity machine to help them in their world.
Just amazing. Now I lost my train, pulled right out without me. But the things that you bring, what is your favorite? What has astounded you the most in your work?
Well, there's a number of things, certainly. I'm just a humble researcher trying to understand how a building was built and why it was built. But it's been it's been quite a ride. A lot of people I've encountered, it's more of a character study on how rigid their thinking is, or on how they are indoctrinated and can't transcend that, or how they become triggered when I talk about my research and that type of thing. So so that's been kind of astounding, the psychology of people. But that's the nature of human beings. But there's so much other things that I find just remarkable about this direction of research. One is, while in Egypt a few months ago, I led a 13-day tour. I've been there before, of course, but just how wonderful the people are in Egypt. They're very friendly, and it's a wonderful experience, very accommodating. And with the exchange rate for the Egyptian pound and the U.S. dollar, it's once you get to Egypt, it's a very inexpensive place to be. Some of the rooms are quite inexpensive. Some of the meals are quite inexpensive. And there's no place like it on earth, not just the Great Pyramid or the Giza Plateau, but all of Egypt. I was at everywhere between the Colossi of Mammon, with seeing those in person, and all those temples, Karnak, and all of them. It was very fascinating. We took a boat ride down the Nile River. It lasted for 4 days, and we got to eat local food and all of that. So it's quite an experience. If anyone gets a chance to go to Egypt, go in debt if you have to, because it's well worth it. It's a trip of a lifetime, and there's no other place like it. So those are some of the pluses I've experienced while I've been involved in this unusual interest or this endeavor, and it's been well worth it.
Well, I tell you what, I always say that be someone who changes the world, and even if it's just your little corner of it, just by smiling at somebody, whatever, we always are told, you can change the world. And I feel like this is a good way. If people, get on board and they understand and they can get past the science prejudice, then it's going to change the world for so many people. And I just find that fascinating. But I don't want to get out of here without the other side of the floor of the pyramids. And I know that this is going to irritate people beyond belief, but I already kind of did that when I talked about astronomy. And I wasn't trying to be offensive. I'm just saying that, scientifically, that should not be the way things work. But when people talk about why the pyramids were built, we can go all the way into Tesla, down to, the ley line grid, to everything else. How much do you put as far as, how much of that do you buy?
Well, you mentioned a lot of stuff, Tesla and the ley lines, that type of thing. There's a lot of far out stuff out there. There's a lot of explanations for anything, including the Great Pyramid. And I've had one guy tell me, well, everyone has a piece of the story. Everyone does. But I don't agree with that. I think that every data point or interpretation is either correct or incorrect. And it is the duty and honor of a researcher to be able to use the scientific method to determine if what somebody says, each aspect of what somebody says is correct or incorrect. So I don't know about ley lines. I don't put much store in them, if you will. And Tesla is a great guy. Some people compare the Great Pyramid with the Tesla Tower, but they seem to be more different than they are similar. So I'm not, I don't think that there's any Tesla Great Pyramid connection. He never talked about pyramids. The word pyramid is never in any of his patents. He never wrote or corresponded and used the word pyramid. So there's no real reference of Tesla talking about pyramids or being into pyramids at all. He never went to Egypt. So, what can you say?
So you don't think that the copper top was relevant to what he was working on?
Well, the Great Pyramid doesn't have a capstone, and some people say that it did in distant antiquity. No, I don't think that any copper or electrum is a word some people use, silver or gold capstone had anything to do with Tesla or anything like that.
Okay.
It was a water pump. It helped people in a tangible way.
Well, why did people, there's no capstone at all?
Not on the Great Pyramid. It's not evidence to examine. It may have existed at some time, but there's nothing to confirm or rule out a capstone existed.
Okay, thank you. I was not aware of that, so that's something I learned right now, like today old. So I always love those little things. I was today old when I learned that there was no capstone of the pyramid. But, well, what about the connection to Orion?
Well, there is an idea called the Orion correlation theory that contends there's some sort of a relationship between the Great Pyramid and the three big pyramids on the Giza Plateau with stars or Orion, that type
Orion's
of thing.
belt.
There's all of that. I'm certainly not a proponent of that. I think it was developed using some rather poor research methods that have created falsehoods, if I can put it that way. And I think that it is just the second correlation theory associated with the Great Pyramid that has been made up. The first one is the Great Pyramid Bible correlation theory. And both of those theories use the same invalid research methods. They contend that precision of an alignment validates the alignment. And that's not really a valid research method. Because of the precession of the equinoxes, the sky pivots 1 degree every 72 years. So now the vents point to different stars very precisely. So that precision doesn't validate the correlation that exists now, the precise correlation. So, and both of those theories about the Great Pyramid use that logical fallacy. Another logical fallacy they use is they come up with correlations that don't have causation. They don't have anything to hook those two data points together, if you will. That one is actually related to the other. So, they say, well, the vents point to the stars, and that tells you when the Great Pyramid was built. But the Great Pyramid was built so that the vents point to the stars. That's kind of circular reasoning. And there's no feature specific to the Great Pyramid, which indicates the original builders intended anything to do with Orion or anything. That's just something that's been made up in the last 30 or 40 years. So it's a rather convoluted story. They think that the math validates a correlation. Do you think math validates a correlation?
No.
Math does not validate a correlation. So they come up with two data points that the numbers sort of match up, and then they say, oh, man, it's right there. But I've developed the third biblical correlation theory called the Beatles Great Pyramid correlation theory. The Great Pyramid has 4 sides. The Beatles had 4 members. Shazam. The math is impeccable. So
I buy that. No.
Yeah. You get my drift?
But they're actually more than 4.
Well, there's a 5th Beatle, but the Great Pyramid has a 5th side on the bottom. Shazam!
You were ready for that.
Yeah, I was ready for that. Each side of the Great Pyramid is divided in 2. There's a crease from the apex down to the center of the base. So each side is faceted. Well, each Beatle is a musician and a singer. Holy moly. They were trying to tell us about the Beatles in ancient time because the math lines up perfectly.
I love it.
And I could go on and on. I'm writing a magazine article about the correlations between Elvis Presley and the Great Pyramid. He was the king. Well, we got the king's chamber. He had his great big long couch that he's famous for. And the king's chamber has the big coffer in it. So,
is there a pink Cadillac in there?
We haven't found it yet, but there must be. So
I want pictures when you do.
So the Orion correlation theory is very convoluted, a lot of circular reasoning, logical fallacies, and that type of thing. I've created several videos on my YouTube channel that you can get to from thepump.org that talks about the Orion correlation theory. And I've gotten a lot of heat for it, but it's just what's popular now,
What type of person gives you heat about that?
A lot of them. And then I make memes on Facebook trying to draw people out to actually talk about it and ask, well, how is a Great Pyramid correlation validated? Well, they're true. So I make up one. Well, that's not true. And then I ask them, how is a Great Pyramid correlation invalidated? Well, we can't talk about that. So it's an indicator that if a researcher can't talk about research methods that were used to validate what he thinks is true, that's an indicator that his research is probably based on logical fallacies. I've asked him, you believe the Orion correlation theory is valid? Are there invalid research methods? No, there aren't any. And it's just bizarre. But, people are not well versed in the scientific method and the logical processes to study anything. And then they're duped into believing these clickbait articles about these correlations that may or may not have any causation and that type of thing. So it's been fun. It has cost me. A lot of people, I won't look. You don't like my correlation theory. I won't even look at your stuff. Well, good for you. But it's another theory that's in crisis. And just like the biblical correlation theory, the Orion correlation theory will end up in the ash heap of rejected ideas.
Well, it seems that is the case with a lot of things that have been, air quotes, fact over the years. And I think that a lot of what we are experiencing, now will be on that trash heap as well. It's just the way that things are presented. You have to do your own reading, your own work, your own research, and real reading. Not blog reading, but in order to ascertain a truth. And we have been told not to do that of late. So it's something that we're going to have to get back to doing. Just because you see it on the internet does not mean that it's true. And I think that's a lot of what you see.
Right. Well, again, researchers need to differentiate between what is true and what is not true. And people well-versed in the scientific method and how to conduct research are directing their attention on the Orion correlation theory and asking all of these questions that I'm asking. And again, that theory is not going to, if you agree with the Orion correlation theory, you're on the wrong side of history. And when that theory is in the ash heap of rejected ideas, that's progress. That's scientific progress. So, 100 years ago, we were told about the bumps on people's heads, and that theory is gone. Phrenology and the Orion correlation theory is going to meet the same fate.
Why do you think people strongly hold on to these beliefs, even when they have been fairly well disproved?
Well, it's a compelling story. Look at this. Everything matches up. But, excuse me.
That's okay. Get a drink if you need to.
Yeah, I may have to. Hold on.
Sure.
But the biblical correlation theory was, a compelling story in its day. But people have told me, well, there's so many correlations, with the Orion correlation theory that they must all be true. No, they're all created using very similar invalid research methods. So the biblical correlation theory has been around a lot longer, and people have made up more precise correlations in that theory. So they have so many correlations. Well, that theory must be true. No. So people, they hear the narrative, and it's well presented. That doesn't make it true, but it's well presented, and it kind of caught on, if you will. People, oh, well, if it's precise, then that must make it valid. So, but again, it's hard to change people's minds. The biblical correlation theory was very popular not long ago, 60 or 70 years ago, but it has gone by the wayside, and science progresses. Sciences come and they go, and we'll see how Egyptology and the Orion correlation theory hold up, in the next 50 years.
Well, I just so much appreciate that you're willing to have these conversations. It is something, it's a lightning magnet. It's hard, though, for people to be able to come back and really have something to stand on. I appreciate that you do the work to have the facts to present. And, there's really a great service being done by providing that information. Because
I appreciate that. I ask people to do the hardest thing there is in the world, which is change their mind. And, I present information that they can either reject without understanding it, or they can reject it after they understand it, or embrace it. And that's basically all that I'm doing. So, but I do encounter people like you that have an open mind and think that there's merit in what I'm dedicating my life to.
Well, if it's good to have an open mind. Not so open that it falls out and rolls around, but open enough that you can accept that perhaps everything that you knew that was told to you, not that you actually learned. There's room to research and understand better sometimes. It's really important by the work that you're doing. If you're changing minds, then you're changing the world. Because if people accept that this is the way that functions, as we were talking about before, in various scenarios, it is going to change the world of so many people. If we can just, get out there and get plans in place to implement that. And, I think that's why when we first connected years ago, I saw such a benefit of this. It's not just an historical experience and knowledge. It is something that has real world application. And, then I started talking to people that I know personally who are out there digging wells and doing things. And it's various of my friends' children as well as various friends. I mean, this is moving through the second generation of going out and just you change the whole world for a whole village of people by providing them fresh water. And if you're providing fresh water as well as, electricity, even minor amounts of electricity,
right,
then you have completely altered the living environment for a whole village of people and created sustainability for them. If they have water, they can irrigate. If they can irrigate, they can grow, corn, or which, as we know, has multiple purposes besides ingestion. There's so many different things that they can do. And it really is a method that can actively improve the world for so many people. If we can just help people get their minds around it, to understand that this is not, a heretic comment. This is real world.
True. I commend you for your work with helping people in that regard. And I ask people, I encounter people and talk either through email or messenger or whatever. And then I sometimes ask, well, what are you doing? Are you doing anything to change the world? Are you just watching sports or taking up air or just consuming entertainment products, if you will? What are you doing? Do you have a cause? Have you helped anybody? And some people say yes, but a lot of people say no. So it's commendable that you're doing such a thing. But I think the original builders wanted to benefit their own civilization,
Indeed.
Not build this big structure to point to stars for some symbolic reason, and that they built this infrastructure and it improved their lives. They powered heavy machinery, created compressed air, which has a lot of purposes, irrigation, and a whole host of other purposes. So it is the Great Pyramid, even though it was built in ancient times, is a real world project that I think is infrastructure, and that high technology can be used to help our infrastructure in our modern world.
Absolutely. You know, I'm always blown away by things of this nature, because it's just such a concept and such a mind shift, really. You know, it just makes life fun and interesting, and it's just a joy to get to speak with people like you who, yeah, I provide a platform.
Yes.
And I talk up the things such as your work that I think matter. But and that's what I do. Yeah, I don't go to Africa. I am not comfortable with that, and that's okay. I'm willing to adventure and travel and stuff, but I have a husband that says, if there's unrest, you're not going there. and I understand, because I don't want to give him unrest, you know. But I do have children who, in their own way, are changing the world, and I think that that's probably the best legacy that we can leave. And I know that my children's generation and their children's generation are going to be looking at things of this nature. And as they look back and as they're being educated, I hope that ideas like this are included in that. You know, it's not rocket science. It's not something that can't be accomplished, as we talked earlier. You know, it's just not. And it can change so many things. And if people will stop fighting it so badly and just, it's okay to be wrong sometimes. You know, it really is. And I think that you're helping people understand that. And you're taking a lot of heat for it.
Well, I am certainly presenting a different idea. And, ideas are kind of like talking to a doctor. Every doctor has his opinion.
True.
And they also tell you to seek an alternative opinion. And so that's what I am, is an alternative opinion to some idea about Orion, or, it was a big tomb that they built, but it didn't work at all. But that's okay. It's still a tomb. Or any of these other ideas, or that the Great Pyramid was a death ray or a beacon for aliens, because aliens came all the way to Earth from Alpha Centauri, but they couldn't find their way back home, so they built the Great Pyramid so they can find their way home. I've had people tell me that. So, but that's what I'm doing. I'm trying to do that, and trying to convince people to do like you do, is to try to help somebody, or help the world, or help the environment, or make a difference in the world. And that's what I'm trying to do in my own small way. And, we had a nice tour to Egypt that I led a few months ago. And I think I changed some minds and opened some eyes for a number of people that were on the tour. So that was another thing that I did to try to help people.
Well, I think that's pretty doggum huge. I really do. And, that's all we can do. We're put in this place for a certain length of time. We get so many different opportunities, and, we have information and we share it, and we just kind of roll with that, right? The best we can do is the best we can do. And I think what you're doing is pretty great.
Well, that's great. Yeah, it's always that way. It's always a minority or a small group of people that's changed the world. And I think on my tombstone, I'm going to put, I made a difference. So, it's compelling information. I hope people will open their minds and read the books and see the in-depth information those books have.
And the YouTube channel.
Pass judgment.
Your YouTube channel as well.
I do. I have a number of YouTube videos, some about the Orion correlation theory. I have both video series about how the Great Pyramid was built and also why the Great Pyramid was built. We even have a video called Is Egyptology a Pseudoscience? And that's gained a lot of interest as well. So people can watch those videos and see what our foundation is all about, our mission statement, goals, and activities. And if they want to, they can contact me through email.
And you're very quick to respond. So for everyone listening, there you go. I appreciate you so much. I am just blown away by the information that we've been able to share tonight. And I just think that what you're doing is so important. It's so brave because you are under attack a lot. And you still keep on doing it. You're kind of like the Energizer Bunny. Just keep on going.
I have a pretty thick skin, and, I'm pursuing truth. So you can transcend, a few words and some evil comments on Facebook or in email type of thing. But I think I'm making more progress than a lot of people like. Let me put it that way. And hopefully next time I do a tour to Egypt, you can come along, and I think you'd have a great time.
Well, I know that I would have a great time. And, it's one of those places that is on my list of things to do. There's so many. I finally got to Scotland last year.
Oh, wow.
And that was quite an experience. It was my first time out of the U.S., other than with my father. And so I traveled with paranormal investigators. And while I can never recommend the tour company I was with, I can absolutely recommend Scotland. I mean, it was just brilliant. And the locations and, when we talk about antiquity, I was touched by the age of the structures there. It's a very old civilization there.
Yes, it is.
Nothing like where you were, though. I mean, it was when I look at your work and others,
check those out.
The love of Egypt and in the Middle East, I'm always amazed by the antiquity and horrified when that is destroyed as well.
Yes.
And I watched those horsemen being blown up in horror, just like everyone else who saw that.
Oh, yeah.
But there's so much there. And the world is a great big place, and you're helping to make it a little smaller by sharing the information that you're doing and the way that you're doing it, because people can learn and understand perhaps methods that were implemented to save a civilization. And we still have the history of Egypt, maybe a little twisted from what it originally was. And you provide information so that people can weigh that in their own mind. Thank you for that.
Great. I appreciate it. Yeah, I had in this last trip to Egypt an excellent tour company led by Ramona Miles, and her website is at lifealongthenile.com. So everything was organized very well, the transportation, meals, and everything. So it was a wonderful experience. But yeah.
Well, that's great to know. With my tour, it was organized by somebody that didn't do that and did not plan well. And we would get to places and not be able to get in. And, things would get dropped. And it was, we got to the first place we were supposed to stay, and it had been closed for 2 years since COVID started because there was a fire and that hadn't been confirmed before we left the U.S. So we had to stay in a lodge instead of a castle and things like that. But you know what? I was with friends. I was adventuring. I was seeing things I'd never seen before. And it was the friends that I started with and came home with, new ones, that made that trip fantastic. And getting to work with friends that lived there, Scottish Paranormal, things like that. People are what make it great. And if I travel again, I will make sure that I contact someone like Ramona, who is a professional and knows what they're doing. And I will feel more confident, I think. But I absolutely would love to do one of your tours. And I know everything would be meticulous. So
yeah, it was. Sometimes travel is expensive, but it's always worth it.
Yes, it is.
And but again, the food, everything was organized. We had tour guides, people on the ground, and it was done well. So I would highly recommend going to lifealongthenile.com and seeing what tours they have. And
we'll do that. We'll do that.
It's only money. So
hey, it is, and you can always make more. But thank you so much for being here. I appreciate that. We're out of time, and I look forward to further discussions and seeing more of your work. I just enjoy you so much. Thank you.
Oh, I appreciate that so much. And one of these days, I'll be back on your show and we'll have another great interview.
I love that stuff. Thank you. I love looking forward to that. And for all of our listeners, thank you so much. We are going to have to duck out pretty quickly here, but you know what? No worries. I'll be back next week. Same cat time, same cat channel. Coming up, you have the Cryptid Creatures podcast with Brian Brock and Todd Stevens, and they are just waiting for you. Enjoy yourself and be blessed. Have a great week.